Welcome everyone to the Heritage Hut Cooking Show, coming to you live on LSTV from the Clubhouse Ballroom. My name is John Johnson. I have the pleasure of serving as your host today, and for this special program, we'll be featuring the talents of the top two culinary experts here in Heritage Hut. Both Brian Baer, the Director of Food and Beverage, and Jeff Stobo, the Executive Chef, have had experience at some very fine restaurants and resorts, and frankly, it's our good fortune to have them lead the Heritage Hunt Food and Beverage Services. Today, they'll be sharing with us their techniques and plans for preparing braised pork, coconut rice, and Polynesian sauce. And those of us here in the ballroom today are going to get a sample of their creation. Will you please join me in giving a very warm welcome Brian Baer, Jeff Stobo.
Hello everybody, how are you today? John, waiting on the master here. But thank you for joining us today. We would like to take this opportunity to thank you for your support. Today we will be preparing some upscale picnic items. The braised pork with coconut cilantro rice and a Polynesian mango sauce. A lot of times when you go to a barbecue, you get the same old fare. Hamburgers, hot dogs. Jeff, what's your favorite, hamburger or hot dog?
Neither.
Exactly. So if anybody was here at the event we did last week for MOA, the key with that is to provide as many condiments as possible. So I think we had 18 condiments for that hamburger hot dog bar.
Give or take.
So whenever you do a barbecue, you want to try to make your barbecue or your picnic stand out. You want to make it unique. You want to make it something special. So we're going to walk through on how to do the pork. This pork generally takes 4 hours to make. It can be prepared in an oven or it can be prepared in a crock pot. We prepared it in an oven using the classic braising method. So Jeff, would you like to get started on that?
Absolutely.
So Boston pork butt is the best to use, boneless. It doesn't need to have a net or be BRT. BRT stands for bone rolled and tied. So if you've ever seen a leg of lamb or a pork roast that's tied, it's because it's been deboned. This is a little bit smaller than the piece we used. The key to this is now Jeff is going to score it. A lot of times if you sear meat with the fat side down, it can get a nice color, but if it has too much heat, the fat will dissipate and there'll be none left. So he's going to score it and he's going to season it up. Go ahead.
And as always, you want to start with first your freshest products that you can possibly get. Here, we try and procure all our meats, fish, poultry, vegetables as locally as possible. And this is a choice Boston pork butt.
One curious thing to note, though, is local is described as within 75 miles of your location. So being here in Northern Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, we have quite a few different options of places to pull upon. So as he's scoring it with the knife, he's probably going in about 2 inches on each side and getting it in a crisscross manner.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend. That's something I learned a long, long time ago.
Do not try this at home, but actually we want you to. So the first thing you want to do is get your oil very hot. See how we scored the meat? That's going to get the heat and the moisture all the way inside, so it'll be nice and tender. When we pull this out, we want it almost like pork barbecue. We can just pull the chunks of meat off. Good, season it up.
Special considerations about handling pork.
Yes, sir.
What are we supposed to be concerned about, do you think?
So, in the 50s and the 60s, there was a big concern about trichinosis. And that was how they kept the pigs. They used to keep the pigs in a farm setting, in slop, in mud, not very sanitary. That has changed today. They're kept in very clean environments, almost not like a farm at all. So the risk of trichinosis has gone down considerably. It used to be you have to cook pork to 160 degrees, almost like chicken. Chicken's 165. Pork nowadays can be cooked to 150 to keep it nice and moist. You can only almost medium well, just a little bit over medium. It might take a little bit getting used to because everybody's had it ingrained into them for so long that eating pork undercooked will get you sick. So use your best sense when you're doing that. If you don't like the texture or the flavor of it, but when we make pork tenderloin, we always cook it to 155, just to make sure. If everybody's familiar with the temperature danger zone, is anything between 40 degrees and 140 degrees is where bacteria can fester. So you want to try to stay out of that range. Pork is much safer to eat than chicken, would be the key.
Cool.
And by scoring it, you also allow, just an FYI, all the seasoning, and this is a pretty standard rub I'm using, brown sugar, paprika, chili powder, onion powder, garlic powder, salt and pepper. And by just gently massaging it and getting all this good seasoning in all these nooks and crannies, the seasoning is not just on the top, but it's going to cook throughout the entire pork butt.
One of the things you can do is if you want to make your own rubs and your own spices, is get you a container like this and keep them in there so you can use them over and over. Jeff is the only person that makes a rub here. His rub's better than mine. Good job, Jeff.
One of many things I do better than Brian.
So, right now he's getting it all rubbed in there nice. You can see that all the meat is getting covered, and then he's going to sear it fat side down. As he's doing that, I'm going to get started over here with the mango glaze, Polynesian sauce. The main key ingredients in this are pineapple juice, Moscato wine, cilantro, my spoon fell out, and mangoes. Mangoes are great. Okay, a lot of times you got to be very careful when you purchase them to make sure they're soft. If they're too hard, they're not going to, or not ripe, they're not going to have the flavor. You're not going to have the sugar content. I already have some peeled right here that I'm going to use for the sauce. So you can hear, when you use a searing technique, you want to make sure that the pan is very hot. That's what's going to caramelize all the different flavors. Look at that. That's gorgeous. Good job, Jeff.
And I don't know if any of you noticed the technique there, but you always want to lay something in a saute pan. First, you want to make sure the oil's hot. Doesn't make any sense to put cold product in cold oil. You're not going to get that barrier and trap that flavor and get that good caramelization like you would if the oil was cold. So you want to make sure your oil is hot. And I laid the product in. No matter what you're using, always lay it in a way. That way you don't risk splashing hot oil on yourself. And I think Brian and I can both say that we've got stars to show.
I know what you mean.
So that's what you want to do.
Interestingly, rubbed on the burn will prevent it from blistering. That's a trick that I learned from someone a long time ago. The mealy texture of that tomato on that burn will keep it from getting worse. The last thing you want to do is run it under cold water or put butter on it. It's like cooking a hot dog. It's not going to work. So once again, he's searing everything there. I'm getting the oil hot here in this pan. So whenever you make a sauce, you want to build from the bottom to the top. So we would not add the liquid right away. We want to caramelize the garlic, the green onions, and the cilantro. Then we're going to deglaze it with the wine and the pineapple juice, and then we'll add the mangoes. It's going to really smell good in here in about 2 minutes. How's that pork look, Jeff?
It is caramelizing very nicely.
Everybody, can you hear that noise? That means the oil's hot. Saute means to toss quickly in hot oil. If you don't have hot oil, you're not going to get anything. You will notice, too, that we always wear gloves and we use our hands a lot. So as long as you're sanitary, that's probably the best way to grab something and to work with, especially a piece of meat like this. If it's intimidating, then try a smaller piece. You don't have to use as large a piece. So right now I'm caramelizing this garlic in this pan.
Oh wow, look at that good color.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's on camera. That's gorgeous. I'm going to add the green onions. And you can adjust it, the flavors and the seasonings to how you enjoy it.
You guys see that?
Like, I personally love cilantro, so I put a lot of cilantro in there. Some people think it tastes like soap.
My wife thinks it smells like stink bugs. So she despises cilantro. I love it.
So, everybody see what the pork looks like as it's going into the pan? So, braising, the French term, is defined as searing, put it in a pan, filling the 3/4 with liquid, covering it with plastic wrap, covering it with foil, and then placing it in the oven. Okay?
And this is about to go in our magic oven.
So and just like I
I'm
said,
surprised
cooking
how
the green
quickly
onions
he
and
cooked it.
the
I mean, that he
cilantro and
browned
the garlic, everybody
Yeah.
should be able to smell that
it.
right
It's
now.
not cooked.
When you sear it,
You want to be
if
very
you
careful
have
with
the
wine.
fire
Everybody
at the
watch
right
Master
temperature,
Chef,
it
Chef
doesn't
Ramsay, all
take
these guys. I
long.
was watching it the other
But you
night.
have to pay a lot of
You don't want to
attention
burn
to it.
Voila.
it where there's
Keep it
so much
fresh.
flame. Look at that, look at the magic of it.
These guys happen to be very
You don't want
good.
it to actually flame. You want to put the wine in and then pull it off. When you get the flame out of it, all you're doing is scorching it and burning the alcohol off. We want to cook the alcohol off. We do not want to burn it. Plus, we don't want to burn the ballroom down.
And
Yeah.
I'm changing my gloves, as everyone notices. When you switch tasks in the kitchen, you always want to change your gloves.
One of the biggest culprits that would, cause someone to get sick would be cross-contamination. So you really want to make sure that you're changing your gloves when you're entertaining. So I don't know if the camera's catching what's in the pan, but now the wine is reducing with the green onions, the cilantro, and the garlic. That's what I'm going to have.
And
in
as
mind.
chefs, we learned very young that wine is for consumption as well as preparation.
Right.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
I've worked in quite a few kitchens where it was definitely encouraged, especially intermittent service where you have daytime service and then nighttime service, where the wine purveyors would come in and they would, there'd be tastings, we call them, but we weren't following the fourth S, which is spitting, we were more swallowing. So
as my sauce is reducing, Jeff is going to start with the coconut rice. One of the good things about the meal that we're preparing is it can be served at room temperature. So a lot of times at a picnic, you're not going to have access to chafing dishes, etc. So you want to serve something that can be served at room temperature that's going to be healthy and still going to taste good.
And this is just a standard parboiled white rice. Generally, ratio is 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of water. We are adding a little coconut milk here today to get that aromatic and that good flavor. So I will use a little bit less water in lieu of some coconut milk. So we've got a little oil in our sauce pot here.
Jeff, I know that both you and Brian have worked at some pretty neat spots over the years. And, occasionally we hear about the Inn at Little Washington, and I know both of you have spent some time there. But what makes the Inn at Little Washington so special? Why do people pay these extra bucks to go there?
I would have to say that it would be Patrick's attention to detail. He's probably, in my culinary career, one of the most meticulous chefs I've ever met in my life, which just means he's very attentive, he cares about everything that he does, and he's extremely precise in everything he does, front of the house and back of the house. And for a long time he had a partner, Reinhard Lynch, who was responsible for most of the front of the house stuff, but it all came down to Patrick.
If I can exorbitate upon that. So the interesting thing is I worked there as an intern right out of culinary school. He actually got a paycheck to work there. So
Not a very big one, I will add. They consider it a privilege to work there at the Inn of Little Washington, and it's a great resume builder, obviously. So even though they do make a lot of money and they're very successful, they don't pay their chefs very well.
But like Jeff said, Patrick O'Connell is the owner of the Inn of Little Washington. He was the Olympic culinary chef for the USA, James Beard Award winner, every accolade that you could get.
30 years straight, right after I left, he hit 30 years straight, 5-star, 5-diamond, which no other chef can say on the planet about their establishments.
So
And he started from a house. It was a house that he purchased, and it was just a home-style kitchen. And he was preparing meals for like 25 people. And now if you go to the Inn at Little Washington, the kitchen itself is modeled after the kitchen at the Windsor Castle. $1 million kitchen. It's pretty spectacular.
One of the things that stuck with me that he told me was if someone arrived to their destination coming from D.C. and got a speeding ticket, they would pay the speeding ticket for it because they did not want that to interfere with their dining experience. So if you showed up and you're sitting there thinking the whole time about this ticket you got to pay, you wouldn't be able to enjoy the 2 $200 prefix menu you're getting ready to eat. So it was a great experience for me. I'm sure it was a great experience for Jeff as well. And once again, it's a resume builder. When people see that on the resume, they know that you've been around those type of people. You've seen their techniques. You've seen how they do things.
Now I added a little salt. I'm going to add a little coconut milk. And then I'm going to chop some fresh cilantro and add a little coconut itself, some flaked coconut.
Right now, I've added the wine and the pineapple juice, and I'm letting it reduce before I add the mangoes. So as I was explaining to John the other day, there's two types of sauces. Everything goes back to French cuisine, classic French cuisine. There's what they call a hunter sauce and what's called a classical sauce. Hunter sauce usually has chunks in it. Think of charroux sauce, marsala sauce, something that has chunks in it. A classic sauce would be hollandaise, marinara, something that's smooth. We're going to make this like a hunter sauce. You can, after it is completed, put it in a blender and puree it to make it a classic sauce. Almost like a coulis. If anybody knows what a coulis is, it's a pureed fruit sauce. So a lot of times you'll see a red pepper coulis, a tomato coulis, a mango coulis. I'm going to add the mangoes now to my mixture. Oh, this is going to be so good. I hope everybody's going to enjoy this when we're done.
I'm stirring the rice just a little bit, just to get these coconut flakes and that coconut milk and all this good fresh cilantro in there.
So I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but I made it where the liquid barely covers the mangoes. And then I'm going to let that reduce. So I'm going to reduce the heat. So an interesting fact about when you're making rice. The French say it takes 17 minutes. You get the oil, you coat the kernels or the pieces of rice, you add your liquid, you reduce it to a simmer, you cover with foil, 17 minutes should be perfect.
Perfect.
That's what they say. So, right now as our sauce is reducing, the rice is going right now. We have the pork already ready. What other questions do you have for us, John?
Hey, you know, a lot of people say they see you working with the knives. If I'm going to go buy a new knife for my kitchen, what are some of the things that I might look for?
So the number one thing is you want to have a knife that feels comfortable to you. If this knife intimidates you, you don't want to use that knife. This knife feeds like it fits a little bit more, whatever fits well in your hand that you feel like you're not going to cut yourself.
My knife is bigger than yours, Brian.
Yeah, it is. One of the things you want to look for is how a knife is made. Of course, buying a knife from a brand name or reputable dealer is going to be a better knife than, say, this is like a utility knife you could buy from a food process, Cisco, a place like that. What makes a difference is what's called a tang. You see this piece of metal that runs down? This is a one piece of metal knife. This one right here probably has a tang that goes right here and it just has a plastic handle. It will break. This knife will not break, as you can see, because it's all 1/4 piece of metal. So you want to look for a full tang. You can get what's called a 3/4 tang, a half tang, but that is the most important part. A lot of times you'll see these rivets in there. That means that's handmade. Wusthof, Hinkle, some of those knives are going to be this type of quality. So
Cut Pro, I think those gentlemen, they're the door-to-door salesmen that come by your house and they've got these wonderful chef knives. And for all intents and purposes, they are very, very nice knives. A little pricey for my taste, but very nice knives. You get like a 10-piece knife set for like $1,200, but they guarantee them for life. So they go dull on you, you get a chip in one, or you bend one, or whatever the reason, they'll replace the knife.
So if you do go out and spend $200 on a knife, do not take it to someone and let them grind it to sharpen it. Because eventually this knife will look like this knife. And if you're going to make that type of investment, you need to get what's called a whetstone. Does everybody know what a whetstone is? A whetstone, and then, I worked at a place that had a building that was a stone building from 1756. And I used to go outside and use the wall. And then I'd clean it because I had a great piece of stone. So you want that piece of stone to sharpen your knife, not grinding it, not cutting it.
I guess this isn't the kind of knife that I'm going to get, the Ginsu special I get when I order a new vacuum cleaner.
And this is a steel. So this is not for sharpening your knife. This is for honing in the blade itself. So if you have a good edge on your knife, You use this, I'm sure you saw me right before I started cutting the cilantro, just a few swipes down the steel, and you just hone in that edge just slightly.
And you can hear the edge getting sharp. I know the sound of it. You hear it? That sound, that's getting sharp, and it just brings out the blade. Wow, that knife is sharp.
Yeah.
Right there.
Extremely.
Alright, now my mangoes are continuing to cook down. I'm going to let them break up a little bit. Like I said, I want a few little chunks in there. When I finish this, I'm going to finish it with a little bit of cornstarch. So there are 20 different ways to thicken a sauce. Tapioca, arrowroot, cornstarch, a roux, potato starch, rice starch. You know any more? Gelatin, eggs. So there's a lot of different ways, but based on your dietary needs, or some people don't eat flour, so they're not going to use a classic roux.
Or reduce.
Cornstarch is a good one. Or reduction, time and reduction. This also makes it really good. What else you got for us, John?
Well, there's a lot of questions I could ask you guys because, you've had a lot of experience with different restaurants and resorts and famous places. And maybe you'd share a couple of those stories with us.
Well, John, in the dry run the other day, you mentioned one of the oddest requests we've ever had as a chef. For me, one of the all-time oddest requests was, I was the executive sous chef at Fauquier Springs Country Club, which is down in Fauquier County. There was a gentleman, it was my first Sunday. I'm learning from the gentleman who is the executive chef currently at the time. It's my first Sunday brunch, so he's kind of walking me through the process and just explaining how setup goes and what to expect. And he said, now there's going to be a gentleman, Mr. Hughes. He was a very nice gentleman, very, very old. He was like 97 years old when I was working there. Every Sunday for 6 years he had the same breakfast. He'd come in, we opened at 8, he'd come in at 7:30, he'd want his coffee black, he'd want his paper, and he would sit there and say he was ready for his breakfast. And it was always an Eggs Benedict, which doesn't seem very odd, but the way he wanted his Eggs Benedict prepared was English muffin burnt. And okay, burnt, okay. So I run it through the conveyor. We had a conveyor toaster, and I ran it through once, and I was like, okay, that looks kind of burnt to me, and the chef was like, no, run it through again. So I ran it through again. And I'm like, okay, that's burned. There's no question there. And he was like, no, run it through again. Ran it through 4 times until the toast was like literally like something that had been sitting in the bottom of a grill for like a period of time that you just kept cooking and cooking and cooking. And then he wanted his eggs not poached, but he wanted them scrambled very, very runny. And by runny, I mean eggs, pan with a little butter, you crack 2 eggs, and you take the fork and just scramble it slightly, and then that was it. No more than like 15 seconds in the pan, to the point where I was like, this isn't even a cooked egg. And he'd want his Canadian bacon burned as well. And I'm like, burned like the toast? Burned like the English muffin burned? Yeah, burned like the English muffin burned. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable with this. Like, you really expect me to serve this to this gentleman? And so I did, and he didn't like regular traditional hollandaise. He wanted hollandaise with a little cream and some extra lemon and, like just a really, really ridiculous sauce. And so I'd serve this, and every time, 6 years, every Sunday, this is the way he got his breakfast. And he always would come into the kitchen and put his thumb up and go, that's gourmet, chef. Okay, and the moral of that story is that, we, as chefs, we try and accommodate, and we try and give the members, the guests, the patrons, what it is they want. If it's within my power to do something for you, and we're capable of doing it, I'm going to do it. And it made him happy.
So, you made a really good point there. So, what can be frustrating or can be difficult is there are classic dishes that were created by Escoffier, Leroux. These are famous chefs that created these French dishes, Eggs Benedict being one of them. When you change the ingredients, it changes the dish. So, is everybody here at chicken piccata? Capers go in chicken piccata. When you take the capers out, it changes the dishes. It's just like having a Greek salad with no feta cheese. It changes it. You can't take ranch dressing and put it on a Greek salad. It's just not the way it's supposed to be eaten. It's supposed to have a light red wine vinaigrette. So of course we try to accommodate everybody, but chicken marsala with no mushrooms is pretty much chicken with a classic sauce and cream, brown sauce, and marsala sauce, and marsala wine. So we try to keep it as traditional as possible, but we will make adjustments for people. So my sauce is almost done. So you saw I just tasted. You want to taste as you're going to make sure that you have the right flavor. At the end, I'm going to add fresh lime and fresh oranges, just so I can pull out the acid. Because when you cook down the wine, a lot of the acid goes away. We don't want it too sweet. So I'm going to do that right now once I get another glove. Thank you, sir.
Well,
how's your rice going?
It is doing very well.
So we added that coconut milk to that rice. And that's going to give it almost a sticky texture, which is going to make it taste great. With that shredded coconut on top and some of this mango sauce and that pork.
Meanwhile, our pork is cooking in our magic oven.
And we checked that pork this morning. It is so tender. A lot of times when people make, I'm trying to catch the seeds in my hand so they don't go in my sauce. I didn't get one, so that's good. There is one. I'm sure that they make a handy tool for that, but we're working in the kitchen.
Hey Brian, why don't you tell them something about yourself they don't know?
Something about me that you don't know. So, my father is Jewish. So when I was growing up, I never ate bacon, I never ate pork, never ate shellfish. So as I got older and got into the culinary field, it became a little bit of a challenge. To this day, shrimp still tastes like it's rubbery to me, just not my soup. But I can make it taste good. The one thing from my background that really helped a lot is that my grandmother and my mother cooked a lot in the kitchen. So one of the things I really like to make is potato pancakes, potato latkes. If you're going to make potato pancakes like you're supposed to, you need to have what's called matzah meal. And I hope everybody in this crowd is old enough to remember. They used to have these shredders with attachments that look like cones, and you had a handle on it. Those make the potatoes perfect. You can't use like a box grater. But that setup, which was famous, as I'm dating myself, in the 70s, was most excellent. Alright, so now my sauce is coming together. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, if you can get it on it, but it has like a nice texture to it, where it's nappe. So that's nappe. Nappe means that you can put the spoon in and it lightly coats it. It doesn't run off and it doesn't clump. Just like that.
Jeff, we've got a lot of us here have grandchildren, and sometimes we do get asked about careers and what our future is going to be. What do you think about the culinary field?
Well, if I could go back, let's say I've been cooking about 33 years now. If I could go back, I would probably have stayed in school. I was George Mason University studying graphic art and psychology. I would probably have finished and gotten my degree in graphic art. It definitely is a single man's game, or woman. It is extremely demanding. Long hours, nights, weekends, holidays, where, the food service industry in and of itself is extremely demanding. It takes a lot out of an individual, and there's not much time for any life outside of work.
It can be a hard business. It can also be very rewarding. I mean, I've had the pleasure of cooking for 3 presidents, kings, queens. I know a gentleman named Tony Kornheiser. Everybody know who Tony Kornheiser is? Right for the Washington Post. So I would go on his radio show, I'd do little demos for him, make him breakfast, etc. And he asked me one time, he's like, my daughter wants to go to culinary school. And I said, Tony, better off pointing her in another direction. Once again, these younger kids go to culinary school and they want to get in this field and they think it's going to be like Master Chef, where you're always perfectly clean and everything's pristine. It doesn't work that way. I don't know if anybody joined us for dinner last night. There was a concert in here. So concert starts at 7 o'clock. Everybody wants to eat at 6 o'clock. We can only physically cook so much food in an amount of time to feed everybody. So it can be very hectic. So me and Jeff were both cooking last night while we had the restaurant manager, taking care of the people on the floor. So it can be challenging. It can be rewarding. I can say that I spent a lot of great Mondays with my kids, because I'm always off on Monday. Never have a problem getting to tea time on Monday. And I think Jeff has shared it well. I mean, we do take what we do seriously, and we put a pride into it.
Well, guys, you know, here in Heritage Hunt, we are indeed fortunate to have Jeff and Brian and the great team of Up to Par Management providing the top food and service in our restaurant, and certainly for special events as well. If you haven't been to the restaurant, I urge you to do it. Please check out some of the special dishes that you'll see coming out of our kitchen. And we've got a lot of new things happening, including happy hours with music. You may be surprised, and I'm sure you're going to be pleased with what is now available. The food that they're preparing today is what's going to be on the menu for the August pool party. Now, as we bring this program to a close, I want to thank Brian, Jeff for sharing their talents and expertise with us. Thanks to GOCO for allowing us to share this program. And to LSTV for their usual great help with the audio and visual requirements and the technical expertise that has made this program and live broadcast possible. We are hoping to bring you another program later this year featuring some neat ideas for holiday appetizers. And next year we've been talking about some tips and ideas for special holidays. Thanks again to everyone who made this program possible. Thank you for all of our audience for coming and joining us today. And please thank you, Jeff and Brian. And we're going to return you now to your regular scheduled broadcast on our closed circuit. Thank you very much, guys. And now you have the opportunity of sampling this wonderful fare. So